There's been a slight power shift in the meta of this game. What was once dominated by Typhlosion in terms of berry output, berry strength, and the reason why a lot of people always want to go to Taupe Hollow to find the perfect Cyndaquil is now, well, no longer as clear cut as being the best berry specialist in the game, and is being competed out by this guy over here, this guy over here, and this sheep over here. But don't worry, if you already have a really good Typhlosion, it hasn't completely lost its top spot. Now, in this video, I'm not actually going to give you a tier list. I'm actually going to teach you how to make your own tier list. And it's for two reasons. Number one, the tier list actually depends on how you play the game. Let me give you an example. One of the reasons why Feraligatr is becoming better than Typhlosion isn't because of its berry output, it's because of the recent expansion to level 7 main skill. And because Feraligatr triggers its main skill a little bit more than Typhlosion, you can imagine that with level 7 main skill being an expanded strength with an increased strength per trigger, having more triggers would close the gap between Feraligatr and Typhlosion in the total strength output. So the problem is, if you don't log into the game very much, if you don't clear the productions on your Pokemon, clear the skills on your Pokemon very much, well then Typhlosion will remain better than Feraligatr. But I'll show you guys in situations where Feraligatr is going to be better than Typhlosion. And the second reason is just because the game is constantly changing. So anything that I say in one video within a few weeks or few months often loses some validity. We've seen a lot of buffs and changes and expansions in the last 8 months of this game, that what I say in one video can often become irrelevant. Let me give you an example. The Charge Strength Specialist Evolutions video, that was based on level 6 main skill. And based on level 6 main skill, the situations in which Charge Strength Specialist, whether it be Charge Strength S or M, would be better than, say, Berry Specialist would only apply at low levels. But by the time you reach about level 50, Berry Specialist will clearly take over. Except, now that we have level 7 main skill, it is no longer as clear cut. And I will also show you this in the calculator. But this video isn't about Charge Strength Specialists, it is about Berry Specialists. Because it should be of no surprise to anyone at this point of the game that Berry Specialists still are the best. And that's because Berry Specialists don't require you to log into the game. They will do their job even if you don't log into the game because they have sneaky snacking. Whereas Ingredient and Skill Specialists, if you don't log into the game frequently to clear the skill triggers and also the ingredient productions, they will be much less valuable. Berry Specialists can also meet favorite berry typings, which will provide double the strength. But even when they don't provide favorite berry typing, they can still provide significant strength to your Snorlax. And that's actually the focus of today's video. We're going to talk about if there is no favorite typing at all, or alternatively you can think of it as if every Pokemon got favorite berry typing, which Pokemon would rank at the top? And to do this, we are once again going to use the Rainonix calculator here. I'll leave a link in the description below, and we'll be using two of the features. Number one is Pokedex, which I think everyone should start using if you want to create your own tier lists. And number two, there is a new feature called Production Comparison, which allows you to input specific stats of a Pokemon to compare to another Pokemon of a specific stat of your choosing. Now you might ask, what's the difference between that and team analysis? Well, team analysis looks at the strength of your entire team. So for things like Helping Bonus, which applies a bonus to your entire team, this is going to be more accurate. But the problem with team analysis is that any Pokemon with Helping Bonus, for example, would be undervalued for their own strength because their strength is in applying to the strengths of other Pokemon, in improving other Pokemon. So if you want to look at the value of a single Pokemon, you should be looking at production comparison, in which case Helping Bonus will apply all of the bonuses only to itself so that you can see the true value of that Pokemon compared to another one. Now you'll also notice an old feature no longer appearing here is called Skill Trigger Analysis. That is now replaced by, once again, Pokedex and also Production Comparison. And I'll go through and explain how to use these with you guys now. First, let's head on over to Pokedex. Now, for the free users, you won't be able to input specific stats like I can here. So I think this video will still be of value to you just to see what comes up when I put in specific stats. But for the free users, they'll just be empty. What I've done here is input what I think is some of the best stats for a berry specialist. So berry finding S, helping bonus, helping speed, all the way up to level 50, which is all the sub skills we can currently unlock, just 3. And then I've inputted what I think is the best berry specialist nature, adamant, speed of help up, and ingredient finding down. We want berry specialists to focus on finding berries, so we don't want it to find ingredients if possible. Then we're going to click this button so that we can start filtering or sorting our Pokemon. In the first part here, if you click one of these maps, it just will show only the Pokemon that appear in those maps. That's not really useful to us today. The Pokemon type, again, it will just filter for whichever Pokemon type you want to see. Again, not specifically useful to us yet, unless you're creating a tier list for a specific typing. We can filter for the specialty of the Pokemon, their sleep type, or what ingredients they can produce. And we can also filter for berry typing, which is actually the same as the Pokemon's typing itself. Okay, so from here on, from evolution stage onwards is where we're going to start inputting some filters for the calculator for today's video. We want to only assess final evolutions because as Pokemon evolve, they get better, generally speaking, they get speed increase, they get more inventory, so we only want to look at the final evolution. We don't want to compare Cyndaquil with Totodile, we want to compare Typhlosion and Feraligatr. You can also filter for main skill, but we're not going to do that because that's irrelevant to us. We just want to look at the total output. Now for skill level, now this one's going to be interesting. You can choose whatever skill level you want. You can choose level 1. But of course, if we're looking at things like Feraligatr and Typhlosion, if we evolve them from base, they should have a skill level of 3. Or if you want to look at the maximum potential, we can choose 7, which is the current highest skill level. But it's only 7 for some skills, and for others, it's still stuck at level 6. So you can just click max so that it auto selects 6 or 7 dependent on the current main skill maximum of whichever main skill. Base is how many evolutions the Pokemon has. So if you've got an Absol, then it will use level 1 main skill. But if you've got a Feraligatr in the calculator, it will use level 3 main skill, rather than setting both of them at level 3 or level 1. So for free to play players who, let's assume you don't have any main seeds at all, this is a more useful button to you to create your tier list. As for completely pay to win players who are happy to buy every single bundle and every single month of premium pass, you probably want to look at max because we want to be investing those main seeds. And then we see the maps again, but this one's a bit different. This one is for selecting favorite berry typing. So we're going to be giving double strength to a specific Pokemon. So for example, if we click Cyan Beach, then it will auto select water berry, flying berries, and also fairy berries to provide those Pokemon with double strength. We're not going to use that just now. We're just going to clear that because we want to look at all Pokemon if we're not biased and give specific ones favorite berry typing. And lastly is what information to display. For starters, we're going to look at berry strength. And we also want to sort them by berry strength. And before we start looking at the Pokemon, you also got to make sure your settings are correct. So for me, I'm going to put in 8.5 hours of sleep. I do naps every single day, but I'm not going to put in the naps for simplicity today. So this one's for healing how many triggers per day. And I like to look at 0 and 100. So 100 just means that I'm keeping the Pokemon healed throughout the entire day. The energy multiplier will be 2.2 times entire day, just to keep the maths simple. Alternatively, you can put in 0, just say you don't have a healer, you'll never be healing. Then what that does is it values self-healing Pokemon, like Marowak for example, a little better. Of course, it's not actually possible to get 100 triggers a day, but I'm going to put in 100 a day just to keep that energy at a maximum. And we're also going to make every Pokemon level 55. And here is our first tier list. In terms of sheer total berry strength, looking at berries only, with the perfect berry stats, Steelix ranks number 1. Of course, there's no current Steel Island yet. And also, Onix and Steelix are quite hard to actually encounter and very hard to catch. They have a lot of friendship bars, so you might want to ignore this first result. But also, coming back to the point of, well, the tier list is going to vary depending on how you play the game, is if you now go in, and I'm going to do this, change the settings to no trigger at all, you will see that any self-healing Pokemon like Dodrio or Altaria or Dragonite, by the way, Dragonite, even though it's not a berry specialist, it still ranks very high on a berry output list. So any self-healing Pokemon starts ranking quite high because of the energy difference. They get that 2.2 times multiplier, whereas other Pokemon don't. And of course, if you adjust your sleeping hours, your napping hours, etc., then that would again change. But let's take the approach that most people will run a energy for everyone healer. So I'm going to put this back to 100 and look at maximum energy restoration. Then Steelix is followed by Typhlosion, Raichu, Meganium, and Feraligatr. So it's in this order if you're on mobile. And the difference is relatively small between all the top tier berry specialists. So ultimately the decision of which one to use will just be which one you get favorite berry for. Now what's interesting to note is that for the top berry specialists, you're looking at about 39,000 strength. Again, these numbers are more used for relative amounts. Everyone's going to get different strengths here depending on your area bonus, but what we want to look at is the worst berry specialist. So we're going to scroll down all the way to the bottom and look at our worst berry specialist. And if you've seen my Umbreon video, you'll understand that actually Umbreon is closer to being a berry specialist, even though it can't achieve berry specialist types of numbers. So Umbreon is right at the bottom. Again, if you've seen my Slarking video, you'll know that Slarking, it is a berry specialist by name, but it actually triggers a lot of skill, almost as much as Vaporeon. So even though it ranks near the bottom of the berry specialist berry strength output list, it would be undervalued because it's actually more like a skill specialist. So let's ignore those two and scroll up and look at our next two berry specialists that rank right at the bottom. So unfortunately for Marowak and Arbok and Raticate, they're only providing about 2/3 the strength as the top tier berry specialists. But you might go, well, that's a bit unfair to these Pokemon because they're self-healing. So how do we compare a self-healing Pokemon at its max potential to a non-self-healing Pokemon like Typhlosion at its max potential but without the healing? Well, I can just look at the numbers and try to remember the numbers as I change the settings up here. So I can remove the healing, make it 0, and then I look at the number output. For Arbok, it goes to about 27,000 without any supportive healing from Energy for Everyone, whereas Typhlosion goes to about 24,000. They do produce more berry strength than their competitors by keeping themselves healed. But of course you might go, well, it wouldn't be fair to compare with Arbok, which includes its main skill at 0 healing, when Typhlosion in this list isn't considered for its main skill, because Charge Strength skill doesn't increase berry strength. So this is where we need to start looking at total strength, which will include both ingredient strength and skill strength as well. So I'm going to now sort by total strength so that it would be a fairer comparison. And I'm going to give all Pokemon max level main skill. Then you'll see that even with 0 healing, let me just show you, without any healing other than just the long sleep, 8.5 hours long sleep itself, Arbok doesn't come very high on the list. In fact, it's quite low, producing only 3/4 of the strength that Typhlosion would be producing at level 7 main skill included. Unfortunately for the Pokédex option, we don't get to see the breakdown of berry, ingredient, and skill strength. So we'll have to go to production comparison and we'll analyze by total strength and sort by total strength as well. And then for Typhlosion, we're going to give it 4 main seeds so that it does account for the level 7 main skill. And I'm just double checking that I'm on 0 energy healing throughout the day, except for the long sleep. And you can see that overall, even though Arbok does have level 6 skill to charge its own energy, and Typhlosion isn't being healed throughout the day because of the amount of skill triggers, and we can see the breakdown if we click into the Pokemon. Typhlosion gets 21,000 berry strength, 12,000 in skill strength, and then a few thousand in ingredient strength. Compare that to Arbok, who gets 24,000 in berry strength. Because of its self-healing, it does overall get more berry strength. It doesn't get any skill strength because the skill goes into the berry output and also a little bit into the ingredient output. So overall, in terms of total strength, Typhlosion is way better, as long as you can afford those main seeds. So let's go back to, let's say, You get main skills only from evolution, so it's 3 levels, and we'll give Arbok again just level 2 since it can only evolve once. The strength will close in much more between the two, between Arbok and Typhlosion, with the gap now being about 6,000 as opposed to previous 10,000. However, there is a problem with using total strength as your tier list maker, and that's because not every single main skill is able to be accounted for. So for example, Dream Shard Magnet. How do you value Dream Shard Magnet? Because it's not comparing the same thing. We're not comparing strength to Dream Shards, it doesn't make sense to. So in order to know whether skills are being accounted for, you can go to the documentation here, which tells you which skills have been implemented in the calculator and which skills haven't. So for any Pokemon that run Ingredient Magnet, even though ingredients do provide strength, it's currently not available. So for Pokemon like Walrein or Slarking, if you look at total strength, they're not going to rank very high at all. Not until the calculator does implement the Ingredient Magnet. So let's go back to our Pokedex, and I'm going to give Pokemon maximum energy all day, and I'm going to assess them at max skill level, final evolution, but berry strength at the moment. You'll see that Walrein is a respectable berry outputter, but the moment we change to total strength, Walrein is nowhere to be seen. It's right in the middle towards the bottom of the list because Ingredient Magnet isn't being accounted for in the calculator yet. So you do need to know what skills are being accounted for when you look at the total strength from the calculator. But if you're not sure, you're better off sticking to berry strength. Now, while we're here, I'm now looking at the total strength of all Pokemon, and you'll see that Typhlosion started to fall below some other specialists. So we're talking about the skill specialist, Ampharos, Espeon, and Golduck, as well as Feraligatr. Let me explain that. Remember earlier I said that Feraligatr was going to power creep Typhlosion? Well, that's because of the level 7 main skill. Feraligatr triggers its main skill a bit more than Typhlosion. So before level 7 got implemented in the game, and our cap was level 50, Typhlosion was just a bit better than Feraligatr in terms of total strength. But since the level 55 implementation, as well as the level 7 main skill, Feraligatr now creeps above Typhlosion. As for the charge strength specialist, let's go back to level 6. At level 6 main skill, the charge strength specialists were not better than the berry specialists. Especially, of course, if we give them favorite berry typing. I'm going to give favorite berry to every single berry typing. So just be careful that you're not selecting the filter option, so not the berries up here. It is, I've made this mistake before, it is this one that has a little Snorlax icon that is the favorite berry typing. Then even more of a difference between charge strength S or M specialists and our berry specialist. So our berry specialist would rank at the top. But if we now give it level 7, so anything with charge strength gets buffed, then the gap gets much closer, but still with favorite berry typing, the berry specialist will rank at the top by a significant amount. And if you're wondering why Espeon is ranking above Ampharos here, is because we're comparing favorite berries. If it weren't for the fact that psychic berries were slightly stronger than electric berries, then Espeon would still rank slightly below Ampharos. So the condition of applying favorite berry to everyone means that berry specialist with berry finding S is going to be still the top tier. The interesting thing is that at level 7 main skill without any favorite berry typing, then skill specialists like charge strength S or charge strength M of Golduck and Ampharos can rank higher than Feraligatr or Typhlosion. Golduck is now at the top of the list, and with a very close second between Feraligatr and Ampharos. And this is a scary thought. Does that mean that skill specialists of charge strength M or S are now the top tier Pokemon? In fact, I can make this difference even bigger. So this 300 strength difference even bigger if I trick the calculator into thinking that I don't sleep at all. So let's say if we don't sleep at all, but we do still continue to forever get healing from an energy for everyone healer, what happens is you'll be able to collect skills a lot more because this calculator accounts for the fact that you're not collecting any skill during your sleep. So if I don't sleep and I collect skill frequently throughout the entire day and night, you can see that skill specialists Golduck and Ampharos and even Espeon pull away a huge amount from the berry specialists. Now you might go, well, if you don't sleep, you can't get sleep research, you don't get your sleep score. There are situations that you can do this. And that's with Pokemon Go++ players who can actually log into the game to do stuff, collect stuff, while the device is tracking. Then you might go to me, oh, but you need to sleep. You're not going to wake up in the middle of the night to collect skills. This hasn't been touched on before, but you could run an auto clicker to collect your skills. Again, I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm just saying that this is a theoretical output that is actually possible. But we need to know, well, how much can Golduck and Ampharos and Espeon actually trigger? And bear in mind that these aren't even skills specialist stats. So if you remember this number 75,000 versus 68,000, and now we give it best skills specialist stats. So something like berry finding, helping bonus and skill trigger, and then give it a nature that is main skill chance up, EXP down. Golduck now sits at a whopping 82,000, pulling away even more in terms of total strength. The biggest problem is let's put in the information expected skill count now, and we're still sorting them by total strength. So I've got sorting total strength, but expected skill count to be displayed. Golduck triggers 17 times a day in 24 hours if you don't sleep at all. So you can see that I've only put in 5 minutes of sleeping. And that is why it can rank so high in this supposed tier list. So the meta really depends on how you look at the game and how you play the game. This information, where I show you Golduck triggers 17 times a day, isn't trying to tell you that you should play the game like you're obsessed and never log out and just constantly click on Golduck. What you can use with this information, let's say you're going to sleep or you're going to school, work, whatever it is, then because of long periods of not logging in, you should swap out your Golduck or your Ampharos or your Espeon. But let's say you're home and you've just got a lot of free time. Then you can swap in your Golduck, Ampharos or Espeon for several hours and have them trigger strength quite a few times because you are able to tap on the Pokemon. And then once you go to sleep or go to school, go to work, then you swap them out for a berry specialist, which will shine when you don't collect their productions. And now if we scroll down a bit, you can see why I said that Feraligatr triggers more than Typhlosion, because the skill count, how many times it can trigger within a day, is higher. So because of that level 7 expansion, Feraligatr can actually rank above Typhlosion. But by the same logic, so let's go back and change our settings to some normal sleep hours. So let's say 8.5 hours of sleep. So under normal circumstances, what you can do is that when you're away from the game for a long time, then you should use Typhlosion because, well, you can't collect the skills anyway. It doesn't have as much skill trigger, but it does provide more berry strength. When you're at home or you're on the game frequently for like several hours at a time, then you can switch into Feraligatr and hopefully trigger the skill 1 or 2 times during those periods. And just a side note that Meganium is also in that top meta, but even though it triggers the main skill a little more than Typhlosion, it still doesn't make up for the difference in terms of berry strength. So between these three, Feraligatr and Typhlosion are both better than Meganium. Of course, the upside of Meganium is that it targets Lakeside, which is pretty much a late game area compared to Feraligatr or Typhlosion, which are more targeted for Silent Beach and Taupe Hollow. But you can still carry these Pokemon to the next area even if they're not favorite berries because they're just that powerful. And now we're going to look at things in a slightly different perspective. Let's look at what some of the worst berry specialists there are. So, while I don't want to give you guys a tier list because it's constantly changing and it depends on how you play the game and how often you log into the game, I would like to note that there are some berry specialists I don't personally recommend you to catch. So this time I'm going to filter only for berry specialists. I'm going to assume that you eventually have a good healer that will keep your energy at a high level for your entire team. I'm going to give everyone level 7 main skill or level 6 depending on which specialty. I only want to look at final evolution. And let's take a look at who are the worst berry specialists, and we've already touched on this slightly before. But also one more thing to note here is the reason why there are double ups is because ingredient lists can vary. So there are 2 types of Feraligatr, for example. At level 30, it can have oil or it can have sausages, and they give slightly different output because of that ingredient difference. All right, so let's take a look at the worst berry specialists right at the bottom. We're not going to count Slarking as the worst because, well, first of all, the skill trigger for Ingredient Magnet is not accounted for, and we are looking at total strength here, and plus it's more like a skill specialist than it is a berry specialist anyway. And again, even though Arbok, Marowak, Raticate, Altaria, these Pokemon are quite bottom tier, they do charge energy, so if you don't run a healer, they can go up in the ranking. And for Ingredient Magnet, again, we can't count these. We can't count Metronome either since they're not implemented. Ingredient Magnet and also Ingredient Magnet. So we're going to ignore all of these Pokemon that we can't account for or are self-healing. The current bottom tier Pokemon is actually poor Primeape here. Primeape does charge strength, so it is accounted for in terms of its skill, even with the perfect berry strength stats. So let's go back to helping speed and also adamant. It still ranks at the bottom of the Pokemon that we can account for. Even Pikachu that cannot evolve, the Halloween Pikachu that it cannot evolve, which by the way is a little faster than a regular Pikachu, provides more total strength. Now, I'm not saying don't invest in a Primeape, because a Primeape can still be used as a favorite berry typing. For Lapis Lakeside, it's just that Meganium is going to be much better. But what the point here is that you can reuse Feraligatr or Typhlosion in any area and still get 2/3 of the strength as something like a Primeape that is favorite berry. Because even with doubling the Primeape's strength, so we'll go to the calculator here and actually give Fighting Berries double the strength, as this is Fighting Berry double the strength. The perfect Primeape with favorite berry is only about 20% better than a perfect Feraligatr without favorite berry. So in terms of investment costs, definitely these are much better for your dream shards to invest in than a Primeape. Now, while we can't actually compare Ingredient Magnet Pokemon, the berry specialists, so like Steelix or Walrein, to their competitors like Typhlosion and Feraligatr at this moment in time, what we can do is compare within themselves. So for example, what I've done here is I've filtered for only the Ingredient Magnet Pokemon, main skill, and I have filtered for only the berry specialists that do that. And in terms of total strength, so in other words berries and ingredients, but not skill since Ingredient Magnet is not accounted for, Steelix ranks at the top of the game. But not only is it better than Walrein in terms of its berry plus ingredient strength, if we now display the expected skill count, it also triggers the skill more compared to Walrein. And since Steelix was released later than Walrein, I would actually call that a power creep because it's both overall more berry production, more berry strength, and it also produces more Ingredient Magnet skill trigger. So this is another tier list in terms of berry specialists that do Ingredient Magnets. But once again, as we go down to Slarking here, Slarking gets a significantly more skill trigger compared to every other berry specialist for Ingredient Magnet. So whether Slarking is better than Walrein or Steelix, that is yet to be seen. Unfortunately for any Ingredient Magnet Pokemon, it's going to get capped by the actual pot size. So the value of Ingredient Magnet is diminishing as it gets higher and higher in terms of the trigger. And we can also do the same thing for the Pokemon with charge energy, so the ones that are self-healing, and look at amongst them, well, which one would be the best. So as for the berry specialists that do charge energy, they charge themselves. This is the ranking amongst the berry specialists. And they all would work best if you're not actually running an NG for every one healer. So with all the complexity of making a tier list, as you can see, it actually varies a lot depending on how frequently you log into the game, depends on how often you sleep, whether you nap or not, whether you run a healer, even the tier list option is a calculator. This is not a set tier list. So again, you can set the level and the stats. And again, if we scroll down, we can see that the charge strength skill specialists, they rank at the top. If we start putting in the favorite berries for every typing, then the berry specialist will overtake. But of course, we haven't actually put in the skill stats. These are all really just for berry specialist stats. You can do that in the production comparison instead. But it still comes out that berry specialists will be at the top. And thankfully, not costing you as many main seeds as the charge strength skill specialists do. But this is just another way to see the same results. So it's actually just the same as if you were to use the Pokédex, but to group them into tiers like S tier or A tier. It's the same thing. We're just looking at numbers as opposed to letters. As to why Primeape has the lowest strength of all the berry specialists in its category, perhaps it's because in the mainline games, it can actually evolve one more time. So perhaps giving it the lowest strength was just a plan for it to evolve in the future. And I thank all the people who have been asking for this video for a long time to know which berry specialist they should catch first or which one to focus on. It took me a long time for me to decide that I was ready to make this video because, well, there were just so many factors to consider. So hopefully this video has helped you guys, whether you've been long-term players or whether you're just starting the game. And if it did, make sure to like and subscribe.